Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's ranking Star Trek's moral support slash guidance characters. So this video is a part of a series of videos where I rank all the different Star Trek characters, one from each Star Trek show, that all belong to the same position. I did doctors and captains and chief engineers and first officers, and now I'm kind of stretching it a bit where I'm not talking about an official position like chief engineer or doctor, but basically the moral support of each show. Who is the character who often gave wisdom to the other characters to help them out of a rough situation. Now this, I do differentiate this from counselors, which I covered in a different video, because counselors like their professional job to like counsel someone and give them therapy, which is, I think, different from these characters that I have listed here who are not professional therapists. Rather, they often have colloquial type wisdom that they impart to the crew to help them out of a rough situation, which I find quite a different thing. So, as normal, I am ranking this not on which character I personally like the best, but rather who I believe personally is best at their job. Who, in this case, it would be who gives the best advice, who is the strongest moral support, who is the biggest ethical guidance for their crew. Now, before I list off the characters eligible for this list, I will start by reminding you, and in case this is your first video watching, you may not be aware, I have limited this to one character per TV show, so we will not have more than one per show. It's just one per show. Anyway, so the characters eligible for this list are Leonard McCoy from the original series, Guinan from The Next Generation, Vic Fontaine from Deep Space Nine, Kes from Voyager, Chef from Enterprise, and Hugh Culber from Discovery. So, these are the people who I believe, I consider them to be sort of the guidance. They often imparted wisdom one way or another from their various Trek characters. So, yeah, now I'm going to rank them on who I believe is best at it. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the bottom of my list, who I think is least effective at this, particularly giving strong moral guidance, and I believe that to be Leonard McCoy. Now, the main reason he is at the bottom is not so much that he gives bad advice or his advice isn't all that great, more to do with the fact that he only gives moral guidance, support, advice to one person, James Kirk. He doesn't really, I mean, there was a situation when Spock was in command that he gave him a bit of guidance. So basically whoever the captain of the ship is, rather than the whole entire crew, which is different from most of the other people on my list, although he's the only one from the original series I could think of that best fit this role, and yet he only gives it to one person. Therefore, automatically, in my eyes, that gives him the bottom of the list because he's too specific and particular about who he gives advice to. He's very snobbish, you might even say, that he only gives advice to the captain. Oh, he's too good to give advice to other people. Also, the other thing that kind of made me think that he deserves to be at the bottom of this list is that the episode Balance of Terror is one of my favorite episodes. I love it to death. However, he gives Kirk the most nonsensical, inspirational speech I think I've ever heard. I think it is, and I think it's hands down the worst inspirational speech in Star Trek, period, is when he's like, oh, he talks about how huge the galaxy is. There's like 1,000,000 billion stars in the galaxy, and every 1,000,000 billion galaxies in the universe, and don't destroy the one named Kirk. What the fuck does that even mean? That makes no sense. That is the dumbest speech I've ever heard. So, even though, like, other times he does give, like, good guidance to Kirk, I must admit, which is why he's in here, but at the bottom. Alright, so next on my list is Vic Fontaine. Now, if you know me, if you're familiar with my channel at all, you know if I were going by which character that I personally like the least, Vic Fontaine would be at the far, far, far bottom of this list. In fact, I did a video in which I named him the worst character in the entire Star Trek franchise, which I completely 100% stand behind. So, but as I said, I'm not judging this by which character I personally like or not. I'm judging it by who is the best at advice. So I had to leave behind the cheesy concept of this character and the fact that he sings 5-minute long songs in my fucking sci-fi adventure show. Don't interrupt a thoughtful, deep, intelligent, action-packed, suspenseful, one of the best shows ever made to give me cheap Frank Sinatra covers. Fuck him for that. But anyway, I'm not here to judge him for that. I'm here to talk about how good his advice is. You know, and honestly, looking at it from how he's able to guide people, I almost wanted to put him towards the top of the list because sometimes he actually gives really good advice. Sometimes he is able to pep up everyone's spirits, and yeah, he was inspirational, like to where Bashir took his music on the battlefront to help him out of tough situations. So it did make me think, well, maybe he is actually deserves to be higher on this list. But then there's several strikes against him, which made me put him second to the bottom. The main one being is that he gave Odo horrible advice when he was trying to help him hook up with Kira, because he did a fake out thing where he lied to Odo, said that there was going to be a holodeck version of Kira just because he knew he'd be too stiff with the real Kira, but he invited the actual Kira himself, and so Odo just made an ass out of himself because he kept referring to her as a hologram, that's terrible advice. I'm sorry, that is a terrible moral support to do something like that, and also not to mention this cheesy sitcom nonsense that shouldn't be in my Deep Space Nine show. But also, I almost considered his helping Nog out with his PTSD as a positive, but then the more I thought about it, it's actually a negative, because then he got too self-absorbed and it became more about helping himself rather than helping Nog. Now, eventually he did do the right thing, where he eventually did turn off and shut out his program because he realized that he was enabling Nog's, and Nog needed to go back into reality. And he did sort of help him initially get out of the rut, but Nog became too obsessed with the program, which wasn't his fault, but he let it go to his head. He's like, oh, I can have my program running all the time. Oh, so awesome for me. Not even think about the damage that he was doing to Nog. And I don't actually give him credit for eventually doing the right thing, because it was actually Ezri who talked him out of it, who made him realize that he was being selfish. So I actually give Ezri the credit in that case. So I actually count that as a strike against good old Vix. So, not at the bottom of my list as he would be if it was about characters, how much I like them, but even in his job of being moral support, second to the bottom. So, next on my list is Hugh Culber from Discovery. Yeah, he's okay. He gives decent advice to people. He's often a good sort of moral grounding for a lot of the crew, particularly Michael Burnham, whenever she wants to go off half-cocked and do something crazy. He's usually there to ground her, and he also gives good advice and is there to ground his lover, Stamets, who often can be a bit of a prick and also sort of not consider people's feelings. And Hugh is actually really good at giving tough love sometimes, even people don't want to hear what's actually going on, he's able to, like, look, I gotta break it to you. And he does it in such a way that makes them not reject it, but actually realize that what he's saying is true. Now, the reason why he doesn't appear higher is because he actually was being an ass when he came back from the dead and rejecting Stamets for no good reason, not considering Stamets' feeling over how he would feel after having his own lover die. And it was Jet Reno who had to be the moral support for him in that case. And she was the one that gave him tough love and got him to stop being sort of so self-centered. So the fact that he had to get the tough love that he usually gives, that was a strike against him. So next on the list is Chef from Enterprise. I really didn't want to put him third to the top. I guess the other ones were just worse because, to be honest, like, the concept of Chef always annoyed me because it's a character who we never see on screen, and it's just someone we hear about secondhand. All the people, oh, such great advice from Chef. Chef told me this, and Chef said that. Oh, he gave such great advice, but we never actually see him, so it's kind of a shtick. It's like a gimmick, which actually annoys me even more. I like the Morn thing where Morn never speaks and everyone talks about how he talks all the time. Like, that never really bothered me, but for some reason the Chef thing bothered me. But again, this list is not about which characters I like the most or like the least. So I had to consider the actual advice that Chef gives, and he never gives any bad advice. I mean, I can't think of any examples. I mean, it's probably easy because we never actually freaking see him on screen, but we hear about the advice that he gives through the dialogue with the other characters, and it's always solid. And he never comes off as selfish. Maybe he worries about his stupid cooking too much, but yeah, there we go. Chef. Alright, so second on my list, and again, she's probably this high, speaks more to the poor quality of the other people on the list, but it's Kes from Voyager. And I know some people might not even think of her as sort of the moral support, but if you go back, particularly the Doctor, like, she was especially helpful to the Doctor when he first came into being, you might even say when he was in his infancy and learning to actually become a real person and think beyond his programming. And it's funny because he was her mentor in medical matters, but in a way she was his mentor in becoming more human. And later, after Kes's departure, the Doctor would ironically fulfill the same role for Seven of Nine, which I think was a really nice dynamic. But however, I would consider Kes more moral support than the Doctor because, again, Kes gave it. Unlike McCoy, she gave her support to more than just one person. She was often there to help out the crew in tough situations. She was able, when Tom Paris was having a dilemma, she was able to sort of make him see things. And also, she was able to help Janeway several times and make Janeway see things from a different perspective that she hadn't considered. And also, of course, when Neelix was having his sort of issue with being confronted with the mass murderer responsible for genocide against his own people, she was able to help him through his difficulty in what I think is probably some of the best moral support in the entire Star Trek franchise. So, yeah, I actually do think she deserves to be number 2. But my number 1 best moral support guidance in the Star Trek franchise is, of course, Guinan. Now, some people, when I did my counselor video, they said, oh, Guinan's a better counselor than Counselor Troi. But she's not really a counselor. What she does is different than what, as I said, she's more of the moral support, giving the colloquialism support to the characters. And she is damn good at it. Like, I can't think of any examples where she was being selfish or fucked up or giving bad advice. And in fact, like, she's often able, like, she's good friends with a lot of the crew, Geordi and Will and Dana and all of them, and she's really able to help them out in tough situations, but she's willing to put them in their place if she sees that what they're doing isn't right. For example, when Geordi was complaining about Barkley, she was like, well, she was defending Barkley because she could see his point of view, and she actually made Geordi reconsider his feelings on Barkley. And when Ensign Ro came on board, everyone was complaining about Ro and saying how she didn't deserve to be there. Guinan immediately latched on to Ro and like, this is someone I really want to know. And so she was actually more willing to help Ro and became like a huge help for Ro in that situation. And talking about tough love, nobody gives tough love better than Guinan. Where, for example, the time where Leah Brahms was visiting the Enterprise and Geordi was all upset because she was being shittier to him than he expected, instead of being like, oh, it's okay, Geordi, I understand, oh, poor Geordi, she instead put him in his place and be like, oh, well, you must be wearing your other visor, the one that makes you see what you want to see instead of what actually is there. And she has such a way of giving tough love and putting people in their place where they don't feel offended even if they disagree with her, because they can still see, she does it in such colloquial ways where they can still see the wisdom behind her words. So yes, definitely the best moral guidance supports in the Star Trek franchise. So that is it for my ranking of moral guidance support. Moral support guidance, I should say, of the characters of Star Trek. So be sure to check out my channel as I continue to rank the characters of various positions. Of course, I'm getting down to the nitty gritty now where I'm starting to reach a bit, but that's all good. Anyway, also check out my channel for many more videos on Star Trek. Also cover other shows such as The Expanse, Breaking Bad, The Outer Limits, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.